The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process. Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer. Welcome back to The Process. On today's episode, we'll be talking to Tessa Brinckman. She's a flautist, flute player, composer, and advocate of new music, as well as many other things. And we'll get into all that today and how she sort of is guided by stories and sort of embodying sounds and feelings when she's composing and performing. We'll take a listen to a Cracticus Fancie. It's a piece from Take Wing, Roll Back, her new album on New Focus Recordings. One of the things that we talked about today was about the critic. And I don't mean just the critic who, slams your piece or didn't really listen to it. No resentment here at all, by the way. But we're not talking about that external critic. We talked a little bit today about the internal critic. So I think Tessa does a really wonderful job of articulating how somebody who is being creative or in the process of being creative or creating something struggles and can struggle with that inner critic saying it's not good enough. And Tessa even gets into how it's a little bit different from her perspective than it would be from my perspective, and maybe even from yours. So stick around for a really kind of interesting and enlightening conversation about being sort of your own worst enemy sometimes when it comes to being creative. But in the meantime, let's take a listen to a Cracticus Fancie from Take Wing, Roll Back, available everywhere on New Focus Recordings.
The the magpies.
It always comes for me from a sense of urgency about the world or my connection to it, whether it's political or biological, spiritual, intellectual, whatever it is, or just sounds that really move me. I think it's just a sense, my body sense that something really moves me. I mean, I choose music that way as a flutist, when I perform it, that someone else has written, and when it really, and because you practice it over and over and over and over again, you sort of pull it into your body, and it gathers space, and it gathers color and tonality and all kinds of stuff. That's aside from how it's scored, right? So, my sense of, I feel like I'm asking myself questions like, what needs to be said now? Or what needs to be heard right now? It's my presumptuousness, right, about what I think the world might want to. But I feel like I can, in many ways, I can gauge what can grab people because of the zeitgeist, because of the sort of agonies that we're in around everything, literally everything.
Yeah, pick one, right?
And my own sort of questions, discomfort around, where are we going, or how do I feel? Or actually also, because there's this feeling of being, sort of hurtled around in a washing machine of life, right? Because things are sort of accelerating in a way that is very unpleasant.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about holding on to my past, present, and future selves.
Yeah.
So the evocation of memory and its importance. And I think also that cultures that are allowed to be slower, like indigenous cultures, right, or traditional cultures of any kind, their ancestors are always with them. They're an information source. So I'm interested in these old and ancient stories, and I'm interested in how they produce future selves. And this is what I find interesting about the aging process too, actually, is just the gathering of experiences is actually fantastic. It's sort of, the ageism doesn't make any sense to me, because it's actually, we're accruing these stories that make us more, if we're lucky, more solid, and have more to give, and have an ability to weave together disparate elements. And so when you go back to your question, your original question about what spurs me on, it's just stories that I hear or see. I'm often reading a lot of essays, listening to podcasts, going around the neighborhood, hearing wild and crazy sounds, listening to the birds, having conversations with friends. I really value my relationships with people, the kind of conversations you have that suddenly spur you on to something. But it's a very embodied, I suppose, process for me.
So you're inspired by these things, by feeling, by history, by memory. I'm drawn to that too. Like sometimes it'll evoke these strong memories. So when you have these sort of inspirations or these feelings, really, what do you do? Do you turn to, do you just pick up one of the flutes? Is that an immediate thing? Has it changed over the years, or does it usually say, okay, I'm going to do something creative, I'm going to make something, I'll go to the flute?
For me to be performing with other musicians and hearing sounds and stuff, that almost feels like I'm in a laboratory, even if I'm playing a standard piece of music, right? But it's a laboratory for me to start feeling a new composition. So I really treasure playing chamber music. Physically playing chamber music really helps my composition. Even if I'm writing something completely different, the sounds I'm hearing, the way that I'm anticipating it.
I'm always so amazed when I'm reading, like I hear a piece of music many times, I hear it performed many times, and then I go and read the score, and I'm like, oh, is that it? Like is that not like I'm unimpressed, like you have to impress me more, but more like, that's it. Oh, okay, that's it. But it's this other, when performers are performing it, it becomes this whole other thing.
It is a whole other thing. Yeah, because what we add is like a huge amount of stuff that's not on the page.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the physical act of playing is so important to me. When I start to get ideas, I do start to I had experimented just starting to write in Dorico and stuff, but the whole kind of like cumbersome setting up, it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So
And it's all like
actually
left
writing by
brain or right
hand.
brain. Yeah.
Yeah. So writing, I just wish there was a program to just write by hand. I mean, actually, sometimes too, I will record, but I think writing down notes by hand and even making drawings, like I have on my wall right now, a drawing of the direction I want something to go in. And, I'm actually being commissioned to write a score this year that I think will be partially a graphic score and partially a through composed, but but I love the idea of creating this picture. And writing pitch sets or rhythmic ideas, these cells. If I have some cells, it's comforting to me. It's like, okay, even if I forget some stuff, if I have this basic building blocks, I can sort of improvise around that. Using the piano is really useful because of its range.
Yeah.
And then the flute's always very useful too. And then, if I'm really unsure, like for another instrument, I will have a reference recording on it, like a Kronos quartet if I'm writing the string. Like that.
I like this idea though of like getting like some type of visual representation that like reminds me of the idea. So like if I come back to it months later, I'm like, wait, what was I talking about? It was this great idea, but also documenting it. Because I feel like sometimes it's in one ear, out the other. And just sometimes being like, even I'm just documenting like what I did. So if it's like on the lap steel or something like that, like I'm just like, okay, you were on this, you were playing these notes, like this is what was happening. Because it can just, I feel like when I get into that flow state, it can just, it's great, it's sounding great. I can record it to document it, but yeah, more and more like not opening Finale or one of these notation softwares, but just jotting it down in some way.
Yeah, and I find actually sort of diagramizing it, with such a word, but drawing it gives me the feeling actually of what I want, even if I'm not specific about pitches or something. It's like, oh, I know what I meant when I did that. Also, poetic references that describe the state of being that I'm trying to go towards. It's funny, I often get titles before I even start, of a piece.
Right, because it's an idea or a concept you're going to work towards.
It's a poetic idea that carries it. And also gathering, like for this piece that I'm going to be writing this summer, I have already gathered field recordings as an accompaniment because it's a fixed media along with its, the analog instruments. And so recording the fixed media and then dumping it into Logic is really wonderful to start. I love fiddling in Logic to combine sounds, and because they're so different when you do different things to them in a very basic way, just having a sense of like the scope of what I'm dealing with.
The magpies. When Tom and Elizabeth took the farm, the bracken made their bed, and quaddle-doodle-addle, waddle-doodle, the magpies said. Tom's hand was drawn to the plough. Elizabeth's lips were red. And quaddle-doodle-addle, waddle-doodle, the magpies said. Year in, year out they worked, while the pines grew overhead. And quaddle-doodle-addle, waddle-doodle, the magpies said. But all the beautiful crops soon went to the mortgage man instead. And quaddle-doodle-addle, waddle-doodle, the magpies said. Elizabeth is dead now, it's years ago. Old Tom went light in the head. And quaddle-doodle-addle, waddle-doodle, the magpies said.
So Dennis is one of New Zealand's most famous poets, 20th century poets. He was kind of one of these sort of Renaissance men who was sort of like a Navy man and a boxer, and he ran New Zealand's first printing press, serious like literature press, the Caxton Press. So he's much beloved. This poem, The Magpies, is one that everybody knows, which I love the fact that everybody knows it, right? Because there's a sort of a sense of a carried reference there. And also he was very close friends with my grandparents and my great uncle. My great uncle was a very well-known poet, A.R.D. Fairbairn. And so Dennis, in his later years, would come around sometimes. He'd show up at the door and sit at my kitchen table because I, was living with my grandparents and, and sort of cackle and chuckle. And then my, grandmother would make him tea and then they'd chat and stuff. And he was, he was an alcoholic. So he was suffering from, the effects of that a lot. But he carried with him still this really impish kind of humor.
And that impish humor, I think, comes through in the poem because I think there is some, we were talking about dark humor. There is sort of there's this couple and they're working a farm. And like you said, there's all this like patriarchal, the husband's working the field, the wife has red lips, like life is great. Like when you read that line, you're like, oh, it's this beautiful, patriarchal thing. But it's doomed because the magpie keeps singing, and it's wonderful. Is that kind of what drew you to this recording too? The wonderful vocalization of the bird.
Yes, I mean I love the sound of the magpie because magpies are in New Zealand because they were brought over by the colonials, so I love their sound. The way they sing is called caroling. It's a tremendous sound. And they are, in Australia, they're renowned for going and attacking people periodically when they're in their certain seasons and stuff. They're very territorial, very funny. They're like, they're like corvids, they're deeply intelligent, very personable birds. So I was very attracted to that. And, what really also attracted me to it too was there's this whole strain of culture and education in the first part of the 20th century, where when you read a poem, you read it with a certain kind of melodious voice. This idea of, of reciting a poem. I think in the 19th century, it was like a thing.
Like you would stand
I remember
up
hearing a podcast about this actually, about how recitations of literature was like a deep salon thing in the 19th century. Women did it, men did it. And so the way he carries the entire music, actually, his voice really struck me. We missed that, actually. I think when you get past 1950, suddenly poets are sort of, talking in these sort of
detached
monotones.
Right.
And I'm like, where's the music?
Right. And you do that in the flute part, especially when the poem is first introduced and we, for the first 2 minutes, there's kind of this building of bringing little bits of the poem in or the recitation of it. But then I love how the flute is sort of mimicking some of the pitch kind of, some sentences end with a pitch up. So the flute kind of floats. And that's a really nice way to bring the flute world for the first 2 minutes into sort of the poem world.
Yeah, I mean, when I begin that piece, actually, I was almost thinking of it like from the poem is from the music piece is from the point of view of the magpie. So when Dennis wrote this piece, he was sort of more like a ballad where you tell the story, right? But I was imagining this music piece as now we're going to tell it from the point of view of the magpie. So the magpie is watching Dennis, right? And it's almost like the sense of like human conversations, like a radio when you sort of turn it on and off very quickly. That's how I was imagining it, coming in and out, and coming into the magpie's consciousness. And then the song begins with Dennis singing it in a sense, and then magpie joining in a sense, So
there's this really wonderful moment then that happens at about I think it's at about 4 minutes in or so. We get to the point in the poem, and I won't give it away for people, or I guess we've already listened to this, so I'm not giving anything away. It's such a good, you should listen to the piece because it's a wonderful piece, and the poem is wonderfully sad. And we get to a point where all of a sudden we get sort of like a drone or something's established where we have this more consistent tone. And it's around in the piece where things aren't going well for our lead characters, but comes in then this wonderful Irish folk tune, I believe, of the same name called The Magpie.
Yeah, and actually there are several The Magpies. I mean, like there's different versions, right? I discovered. But I love this idea of, thinking about the famine in Ireland and Irish history, and I think Dennis has a connection. It felt to me that because this poem was a ballad, like I feel like he has Irish roots. I'm not entirely sure, but it does. That was what came through to me, was the sort of Celtic Irish stuff. It's all those things, and and it's funny because there seems to be a second stage after that, was when I start to really get into it, then I get discouraged.
Well, immediately disappointed. There's the honeymoon portion of it where this is a great new idea, and then could I actually play this? Could the instrumentalist actually pull this off?
Right. Or is this just like this is really a terrible idea? Everyone's going to think it's really stupid. They're going to roll their eyes.
Who needs critics, right? We're our own worst.
Exactly. We do it very well ourselves. And so I will kind of, when I know that I have a deadline or something, I will force myself to work on it and go, okay, just 5 minutes. Just fiddle for 5 minutes. You can go away. You're allowed to go away after 5 minutes. I usually find after 5 minutes that something is entertaining me. So then I can stick to it and start to do something. And then when I reach this kind of stress level, I leave. And then I come back to, it's like, okay, I'm going to come back to
stop and do something else.
And then somehow some kind of Rubicon will be crossed, and suddenly it's like, actually, this does work. I'm amazed. It actually works. Like, who knew? So, I kind of allow some slack for, sometimes, when I compose, I've been totally convinced all the way through. It's like, yes, this is a great idea. But I find that now I'm trying to stretch myself and do things that don't have the immediate reward of the sound. But I'm going, no, just stick to it. Just find out. So then I go through this thing like, but I keep going. And often too, pulling away just one or two things like, oh, now it's talking to me. Sometimes I might even do an early spatialization just to have a sense of like, oh, that's what I'm trying to say. It's that helps, So I'm really learning how to encourage myself and teach myself how to do this, actually. I mean, I know how to build stuff as a flutist. If someone gives me, a composition, it's like, improvise. I can improvise like crazy. I can build a composition from nothing. And feel no worry about it, because I can be fully present and do that. But committing to a project on paper, so to speak.
Tessa, this has been wonderful, talking about your creative process, talking about this wonderful piece and the great album. Can we take a minute now and just tell us where we can find out more about you, about your music, and then just tell us a little bit about the album and where we can get it?
Sure. Well, you can find me online on my website to start with, because all the stuff is there. And I live in New York City, so I do a lot of stuff here. And so you can always come out and see me perform live. And yeah, so you can find me on social media and all the rest of it. And New Focus Recordings put out this album, so you can find it on New Focus. It's also on Bandcamp. And also, if you write to me, I can mail you a CD, sell you a CD that way. So, and you can order. I think they've just done it now, where you can order the CD through the website itself. Yeah. So, and I always love to sell recordings to people and sort of engage, because it's once you make something like this, it's fascinating to me to see what appeals to people and why. Like, I've gotten very different responses about, pieces they love, and then, they're just very attached to, and it's very interesting for me.
Thanks to Tessa for sharing her time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series, and as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.